Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving right into the weekly agricultural updates for June 14, 2026. And wow, we've got some massive shocks reshaping India's kharif season to talk about. We're looking at a super complex landscape right now. Weather anomalies are basically forcing crop decisions, global markets are squeezing input costs, and ultimately, all of this is severely impacting farm income. We're actually going to kick things off with this startling number right here, 59%. That is the year-on-year surge in tomato wholesale prices. Now, you might be wondering, why start a broad agricultural update with tomatoes? Well, because this number is a massive early signal of supply chain distress and food inflation. Just to put that into perspective, as of June 10th, mandi prices shot up 36% in literally just 1 week. This isn't just a random blip, it's a clear symptom of localized weather constraints disrupting arrivals into consuming centers. It really shows how heat and supply frictions are already taking a heavy toll on perishable early season crops. So, the big question staring us in the face today is your farm actually ready for the 2026 kharif squeeze? Because navigating this season is going to require some immense strategic precision. You just can't rely on historical planting schedules this year. It's a whole new ballgame, and you have to adapt to real-time data if you want to protect your margins. All right, let's get into Section 1, the shock, monsoon reality check. We're talking stalled progress and emerging El Niño risks. Now, you know the normal onset for the southwest monsoon is usually June 1st, right? Well, this year, we saw the actual onset over Kerala on June 4th, so a 3-day delay. Not the end of the world. But the real issue is what happened next. By the 11th and 12th of June, the Arabian Sea branch completely stalled right at the west coast, and that has left critical rainfed belts in Maharashtra and Gujarat incredibly hot, dry, and just waiting. While the east coast and northeast have seen progression, the western rainfed belts are effectively locked out of their normal sowing windows. And here's the real kicker. It's not just a late start. We're looking at a structural deficit. The IMD is projecting overall seasonal rainfall at a highly concerning 90% of the long-period average. Plus, this is all happening under emerging El Niño conditions, which, as we know, historically brings a very high probability of below normal or deficient rainfall, especially over central and northwest India. Guys, this is the first clearly below normal forecast we've had in 3 years, and it is completely altering the risk profile for the entire season. Moving on to Section 2, the policy shield. Let's look at how aggressive MSP hikes are being used to direct planting behavior. Okay, check out these numbers. The government is guaranteeing some absolutely massive cost margins here. We're talking 54 to 61% over the estimated cost of production for pulses like moong and tur, and coarse grains like bajra and maize. This is a highly strategic, calculated move. By setting these price floors at least 1.5 times the cost, the government is heavily incentivizing farmers to switch over to specific climate-resilient crops that require way less water than your traditional choices like paddy. When we break down the absolute hikes across 14 kharif crops, a very deliberate structural push toward oilseed self-sufficiency really emerges. Sunflower seed saw a massive jump of 622 rupees per quintal. Niger seed and sesamum are also seeing hikes over 500 rupees. Cotton has been bumped up by 557 rupees as well. The state is sending a crystal clear price signal right here. If you have the right soil and you can manage that tricky moisture risk, oilseeds and cotton are where the financial backing is absolutely the strongest this year. Which brings us to Section 3, the input squeeze. Let's uncover the hidden traps in global fertilizer and fuel costs. So globally, urea prices have literally jumped 30 to 40%. This is largely driven by supply disruptions going on around the Strait of Hormuz. But looking at India, the regulated retail price is held firmly in place at 266 rupees for a 45-kilo bag of urea and 1,350 rupees for DAP. Now, India is heavily import-dependent, which means this global shock is absolutely hammering the system behind the scenes. But for now, it's being heavily masked from the farmer by state intervention. Now, how is India handling that? Well, the state is absorbing this massive global shock with an 11.6% subsidy hike for summer crops. Because they're doing this, physical stocks are actually quite comfortable right now. They're sitting at over 50% of the seasonal requirement, which is way above the usual 33% pre-kharif norm. So the physical availability of fertilizer, not the immediate issue heading into sowing. But, and this is a big but, As this World Bank warning clearly highlights, affordability is quickly becoming a structural trap for farmers. They are projecting global fertilizer prices to rise 31% on average this year alone. Add to that the fact that India's domestic wholesale fuel and transport inflation hit 8.3% in April, largely thanks to Middle East tensions. What does that mean for you? It means diesel for your irrigation pumps and your tractors is significantly more expensive. So even with subsidies keeping the actual fertilizer bag cheap, the total cost of just operating a farm is ballooning. Let's map this all out in Section 4, Mapping the Cascade. We'll look at regional risk zones and outcomes. What we're looking at here is a sharp, almost binary outcome across the country. It's like a tale of two very different farming realities. On one hand, you have severe yield risks present in the rain-fed Deccan and Central Belts, places like Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Madhya Pradesh. Out there, the delayed monsoon means a very high probability of compressed sowing windows, or even worse, false starts that force incredibly expensive resowing. Conversely, if you look at the irrigated Northwest, Punjab, Haryana, UP, they face much lower early weather risk thanks to canals and tube wells. But remember that inflation we talked about? They are heavily exposed to that margin squeeze from the rising diesel and power costs required to actually pump all that water. All right, let's get practical. Section 5, the Farmer's Playbook. Here are the actionable insights for the 2026 season. If you're operating in one of those rain-fed hotspots, especially in Maharashtra or Gujarat, the data is pointing to some very clear defensive steps. First, you've got to avoid full-scale early sowing of long-duration crops like cotton right now. The moisture just isn't there in the soil, and the risk of pest pressure and eventual yield loss is way too high. Second, you simply must wait for assured moisture and an active monsoon spell before committing your seeds to the soil. Be patient. And third, strategically shift your marginal land over to short-duration contingency crops like pulses or millets. They need less water, and as we saw earlier, they have those massive, newly guaranteed MSP margins attached to them. Now, zooming out across all regions, your main strategy right now has to be about hedging risk. Leveraging those big MSP hikes for Tor and Urad, that's just a really smart financial play. Agronomically speaking, aggressively minimizing early chemical fertilizer outlays is your absolute best defense against this El Niño. Think about it. If you sink massive capital into fertilizer upfront and the rain fails, you take a catastrophic loss. So adopt moisture conservation techniques like residue retention. If you're in a dry zone, shift away from water-heavy paddy. And please, optimize your urea dosage based strictly on actual soil tests, not just out of habit. And tying perfectly into those agronomic steps is the government's Khet Bachao, or Save the Farm, balanced fertilizer campaign. This is a vital framework for us right now. This month-long initiative isn't just about some distant long-term soil health goal. It's a very direct, highly practical way for you to correct spatial urea overuse and manage your inflating input budgets this exact season. By substituting excessive chemical use with integrated nutrient management, you directly reduce your upfront financial exposure during a highly unpredictable monsoon. It's win-win. So this brings us to the ultimate challenge of the 2026 kharif season. I want to leave you with this final thought to really chew on for your own operations. As we watch this whole causal chain unfold, from the stalled rains up in the sky all the way down to input inflation at the local shop, will your farm's survival this year rely on your proactive, strategic crop choices, or will it be entirely dependent on the safety net of state subsidies? Really think about that. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, stay resilient out there.